See how a cunning billionaire girl cheated a piano musician after using his skills. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel shimmered under the glow of countless crystal chandeliers. Guests in sleek suits and glittering gowns moved like an ocean of elegance, their laughter mingling with the delicate chime of crystal glasses. And at the center of it all sat Veronica Steele, 32 years old, tall, white, with platinum blonde hair that cascaded over her shoulders like liquid gold. Her red dress was cut perfectly to her figure, not scandalous, but enough to turn heads and spark whispered envy. She looked every inch the young billionaire heiress she was, confident and untouchable, her gaze sweeping over the crowd like a queen surveying her court. Tonight's gala was in her honor, not for anything as common as a birthday, but to celebrate another acquisition in her rapidly expanding empire. Her name was already whispered in corporate circles as someone you didn't cross, someone who could turn a handshake into a fortune or ruin with the same disarming smile. She leaned back in her chair, a glass of vintage champagne between her manicured fingers, and allowed herself a small, knowing smile. In the far corner of the ballroom, half hidden behind the carved oak pillars, a man moved quietly among the staff, collecting discarded glasses from side tables and dusting invisible flecks from the gleaming floor. Samuel, 28, black African from Ghana, his curly hair cropped close, his broad shoulders filling out the white janitor's uniform, had been working at the Ritz-Carlton for just over a year. His physical fitness was obvious even under the plain uniform, a body shaped by work, not luxury. Most people didn't notice him at all. Those who did rarely looked twice. Veronica's gaze drifted toward him for no particular reason, perhaps boredom, perhaps idle curiosity. There was nothing in his appearance to suggest he belonged anywhere but among the quiet shadows of the staff. Yet, in the way he moved, steady, deliberate, there was a strange dignity. She sipped her champagne and smirked. The string quartet in the corner had just finished a flawless but uninspired waltz when Marla, Veronica's closest friend, an occasional partner in mischief, leaned in with conspiratorial glint in her eyes. That piano's been sitting there all night, untouched. Shame, really. Veronica followed her glance to the glossy black grand piano on the small stage. It's only for the hired musicians, she said lazily. Marla's smile sharpened. Or anyone brave enough. It was then that Veronica's eyes slid back to Samuel, who was just passing near the stage, balancing a tray of empty glasses. A thought, mischievous and tinged with the thrill of spectacle, slid into her mind. She set her glass down and stood, her heels clicking against the marble as she crossed the floor toward him. The movement alone drew attention. Veronica Steele never walked anywhere without becoming the center of the room's gravity. Samuel straightened slightly when he saw her approaching, unsure if he was in trouble for some unintentional slight. She stopped in front of him, her height accentuated by her heels, bringing her almost level with him. "You," she said, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard by nearby guests. "Can you play the piano?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "A little, ma'am." Her smile was slow, almost predatory. "A little? I'll make you a deal." She gestured toward the stage. "If you can play that piano, really play, I'll marry you." Her tone dripped with playful sarcasm, as if the very idea were a joke meant for crowd. A ripple of laughter spread among the guests who had turned to watch. Someone near the bar chuckled. "Now this I've got to see." Samuel's expression didn't change much, but his dark eyes held something unreadable. "And if I can't?" he asked. "Then," she said with mock gravity, "you go back to polishing floors, and I'll know not to waste my champagne on you." The humiliation was deliberate, a spark of sport in Veronica's otherwise perfect evening. She expected him to decline politely or laugh it off. Instead, Samuel placed a tray on a nearby table and stepped toward the stage. A murmur went through the room. Veronica arched a brow, intrigued. She followed, the red fabric of her dress swaying with her hips, her platinum hair catching the chandelier light as she took her seat front and center. Samuel sat at the piano bench, his white janitor's uniform stark against the polished ebony wood. He lifted the fallboard, revealing the ivory keys, and rested his hands lightly on them. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then he played. It wasn't just music. It was a flood, a confession, a story told without word. His fingers moved with a speed and precision that belied the rough work his hands had known. The notes poured out like water from a broken dam, some soft and tender, others sharp and defiant. The melody rose and fell, weaving between sorrow and triumph. Every phrase a thread in a tapestry only he could see. The room was transfixed. Guests who had been mid-conversation now stood frozen, glasses halfway to their lips. Even the staff paused in their work, drawn by the sound. Veronica's smirk had vanished. She sat forward, her champagne untouched, watching the man in the white uniform transform into something else. His body leaned into the music, his face focused but unstrained, as if the piano were not an instrument but an extension of himself. When the final chord faded, the silence in its wake was as profound as the music had been. Then, slowly at first, the applause began polite at first, then swelling into something genuine and almost feral. People stood. Whistles cut through the clap. Someone shouted, "Encore." Samuel simply closed the piano, stood, and gave a small nod. Without a word, he stepped down from the stage, retrieved his tray, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. Veronica sat still, her mind replaying what she had just witnessed. She had meant to mock him, to turn him into a brief moment of amusement for her circle. Instead, she had handed him the stage, and he had owned it. And for the first time in a long time, Veronica Steele felt something entirely unfamiliar. She was the one being humbled. The applause still echoed faintly in Veronica's ears even after the music had stopped, like the ghost of a storm that refused to pass. She sat perfectly still, her red dress wrapping around her like a flame, her platinum hair a soft halo in the chandelier light. But inside, her thoughts were anything but still. Around her, the crowd was abuzz. Conversations burst in sudden bursts. Where did he learn to play like that? Was he hiding it this whole time? That man should be on a concert stage, not mopping floors. And each question was a needle pricking at Veronica's pride. She, the host, the one who owned this very room, had been the last to know. Marla leaned in, still clapping softly. "Veronica, who is he?" Veronica didn't answer. Instead, she stood abruptly, her heels biting into marble as she crossed toward the far side of the ballroom where Samuel was quietly collecting glasses again. The guests parted instinctively. It wasn't often they saw her move with such purpose. Samuel noticed her approach, but did not quicken or slow his pace. When she reached him, she paused, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. "You never told anyone you could do that," she said. He looked up briefly, then down again as he stacked glasses. "You never asked." It was an infuriating answer, and yet there was something about it that hooked her, like a riddle she couldn't leave unsolved. "Where did you learn?" she pressed. Samuel's dark eyes met hers for a heartbeat. "At home." Home being Ghana, he said simply, then turned to place the tray at the staff table. No elaboration, no explanation, as if the conversation were already over. But Veronica was far from done. The gala wound down in glittering waves, laughter spilling toward the exits, the soft shuffle of coats and handbags, the final notes from the string quartet as they packed up. Veronica stayed until the last guest had left. Her security detail trailed her discreetly as she moved through the quieting ballroom. Samuel was near the far wall now, stacking chairs for the morning's crew. She approached again. "Samuel," she said, tasting his name. It fit him, solid, unpretentious, with a weight to it. He looked up. "Yes, ma'am." "Tomorrow," she said, "you will meet me here at 10 in the morning. We're something better than that uniform. We're going somewhere." He hesitated. "With respect, ma'am, I have work. I own this building," she interrupted, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You'll be paid for your time." She didn't wait for his answer, just turned on her heel and walked away. Behind her, Samuel stood still for a long moment before returning to his work. The next morning, the city was bathed in gold, the skyscrapers catching the light like blades. Samuel arrived exactly at 10, wearing a simple button-down shirt and clean black trousers. The clothes were modest, but they fit well, and on him they looked sharper than most of the tailored suits Veronica had seen in her circle. She was waiting in the back of a sleek black limousine. The driver opened the door for him, and Samuel slid inside. Veronica looked at him briefly, then gestured for the driver to go. "Where are we going?" he asked. "You'll see." The car wound through the city until it stopped in front of an ornate concert hall, the kind reserved for the world's top performers. Samuel stared at it for a moment before following her inside. On stage, under a single spotlight, sat another grand piano, bigger, blacker, more commanding than the one in the hotel. The hall was empty except for a single man in a tailored suit standing near the instrument. "This," Veronica said, "is Maestro Belvedere. He's selected with a student." The maestro, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. "You're the janitor," he said flatly. "I am," Samuel replied. "Play." It was a command, not a request. Samuel sat, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. And again, the world disappeared into music. The maestro didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't speak until the final note hung in the air and died. Then, very quietly, he said, "Where have you been hiding?" Samuel shrugged. Hiding doesn't always mean you have a choice. For the next 2 hours, the maestro pushed him, complex pieces, improvisations, techniques meant to break the untrained. Samuel played each one, sometimes faltering, sometimes pausing to think, but always continuing, always finding his way back. By the time they stopped, sweat was beating at his temples, and his shirt clung slightly to his shoulders. The maestro turned to Veronica. "He's raw, untamed, but this one could burn the world down with the right stage." Veronica's lips curved into a slow smile. "Then we'll give him one." Samuel stood, shaking his head. "I didn't agree to." "Yes, you did," she cut in. Last night, when you sat down at that piano, you agreed. You just didn't know it yet. Over the weeks that followed, Samuel's life shifted in ways he could barely process. Veronica arranged everything. Practice sessions with a maestro, a personal trainer, even a new wardrobe. She was relentless, pushing him harder than anyone had ever pushed before, but never without reason. And though he bristled at her control, he couldn't deny that with every passing day, he played better, stronger, freer. What began as a cruel joke in a glittering ballroom had become something else entirely, something neither of them could quite name. And as the date of his first public performance approached, the air between them grew charged with something more than music. The night of the concert arrived. The same chandelier light, the same opulent crowd. But this time, Samuel wasn't in a white janitor's uniform. He stood backstage in a tailored black suit, his curly hair neatly trimmed, his broad shoulders squared. Veronica, in a new red gown that seemed to shimmer with every movement, came to him just before he walked on. "Remember what I said the night we met?" she asked softly. "That you'd marry me if I could play," he said, a ghost of a smile on his lip. She leaned in, her voice just for him. "I don't break my promises." And with that, Samuel stepped into the light.